What if, all of a sudden, doing what is right put your life at risk? Would you stand firm or give in to the pressure? Daniel chapter 6 takes us into a tense situation where faithfulness is tested at the highest level. Daniel was not just a wise man. He was someone who chose to remain faithful to God, even when it meant facing a death sentence. Surrounded by jealousy, targeted by an unjust plot, and thrown into a den of lions, his story reveals something far greater than deliverance. It reveals the power of an unshakable faith. Today, you may not be facing a literal den, but you are facing pressure, difficult decisions, and moments when doing what is right seems costly. That is exactly where this message becomes real. In this video, you will reflect on lessons that strengthen your faith, bring direction in difficult times, and renew your trust in God. And as you listen to this story, try to notice which of these lessons connects most with what you are going through today. Let's begin. First lesson: God positions you with purpose. And over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Daniel 6:2. Daniel did not reach this position by chance, nor merely by his own ability. There was a divine purpose guiding every step of his journey. In an environment completely opposed to God's principles, he was placed in a position of influence to protect, lead, and demonstrate faithfulness. This shows that God does not limit his work to perfect environments. On the contrary, he places his people exactly where his presence needs to be revealed. Perhaps you are in a challenging place, surrounded by pressure or even misunderstanding. Still, this does not mean the absence of God, but rather a divine strategy. Every detail of your life is under the Lord's control. When you understand this, you begin to see your work, your family, and your circumstances as part of a greater plan. God has positioned you where you are, so that through your life, he may be glorified and his purpose fulfilled. Second lesson: the difference begins within. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. Daniel 6:3. Daniel did not stand out by trying to impress people, but by being faithful in his inner life. The excellence within him was the result of a life aligned with God, built in the secret place, away from human eyes. This shows that true distinction does not come from outward effort, but from a transformed heart. In an environment where many were seeking power and recognition, Daniel remained upright, consistent, and guided by principles. God honors this kind of posture. When we take care of our inner life, our thoughts, intentions, and character, our actions naturally begin to reflect that transformation. It is not about appearance, but about essence. The world values quick results, but God works within us first, and when he does, recognition becomes a result, not a goal. An excellent spirit is not improvised, it is cultivated daily in the presence of God. Third lesson: not every advancement will be celebrated. Then the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Daniel 6:4. Daniel's advancement revealed an important truth. Growth also attracts resistance. His integrity bothered those who did not share the same commitment, so they looked for ways to bring him down. This teaches us that not every achievement will be met with support. Some people will rise against you not because you failed, but because you remained faithful. Daniel was not accused because of mistakes, but because of his consistency in doing what was right. And that is a powerful lesson. Continue being who God has called you to be, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Do not compromise your values just to be accepted. God's approval is far greater than human recognition. When you remain steadfast under pressure, your life becomes a living testimony. In the end, it is not people's opinions that define your destiny, but the faithfulness you maintain before God. Fourth lesson, your faith may become a target. Then these men said, "We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God." Daniel 6:5. When they could not find any fault in Daniel's life, they decided to attack what made him different, his faith. This reveals an important truth. The stronger you stand in God, the more it may unsettle those who do not live the same way. Daniel's faith was not hidden. It was visible in his actions, choices, and priorities, and because of that, it became a target. There may be moments when your faith is questioned, pressured, or even ridiculed, but that is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of conviction. Daniel did not compromise his relationship with God to avoid trouble. He remained faithful, even knowing the risks. This lesson teaches us that following God requires courage. It will not always be comfortable, but it will always be right. When your faith is genuine, it becomes evident, and sometimes that attracts opposition. Still remain firm. God honors those who do not let go of him. Fifth lesson, not every decision is just. Therefore King Darius signed the written decree. Daniel 6:9. King Darius's decision was not born from truth, but from influence and manipulation. Even as a ruler, he was led by others' interests and ended up signing something unjust. This teaches us that human systems are flawed, and not every official decision reflects true justice. At times in life, you may face situations where what is right does not seem to prevail, and that can bring frustration or discouragement. Yet Daniel shows us that even in the face of unjust decrees, it is possible to remain steadfast. Our trust should not be in human systems, but in God, who is perfectly just and sovereign. He sees what no one else sees and judges with truth. When we place our hope in him, we are not shaken by temporary decisions. Even when everything seems against us, God is still in control, and in the right time, his justice will always prevail over any human injustice. Sixth lesson, consistency reveals maturity. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home, and in his upper room, with his windows open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times that day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since early days. Daniel 6:10. Daniel's response under pressure reveals something profound. He did not change his spiritual routine. Even knowing the risk, he continued to pray as he always had. This shows that spiritual maturity is not found in occasional actions, but in consistency. Daniel did not seek God only in a moment of crisis. He already had a firm life built in the secret place. When difficulty came, he simply remained faithful to what he had always practiced. This is a powerful lesson. Those who are faithful in the small remain steady in the great. Spiritual discipline strengthens the heart to face difficult days. Many change under pressure, but those with deep roots remain. Daniel did not compromise his relationship with God because of external circumstances. He teaches us that daily faithfulness, even when no one sees, sustains a strong and stable life. Seventh lesson, your actions speak for you. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Daniel 6:11. Daniel did not need to announce his faith. His actions made it clear. Those men knew exactly where to find him because his life was consistent with what he believed. This teaches us that the strongest testimony is not in words, but in daily practice. In a world where many speak but few truly live out what they believe, God calls us to a faith that is visible through consistent actions. Daniel did not pray to be seen, but because he had a genuine relationship with God. Even so, his faithfulness became evident. In the same way, our choices, habits, and reactions reveal who we truly are. When we live aligned with God, it naturally shows. It is not about appearance, but about authenticity. People may question what you say, but they rarely ignore what you live. In the end, it is consistent actions that build a testimony that speaks for itself. Eighth lesson, God can use any situation. Then the king gave the command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." Daniel 6:16. The lion's den seemed like the end of Daniel's story, but in reality it became the setting where God would reveal himself in an even more powerful way. Even in a moment of threat and injustice, God's name was acknowledged by the king, showing that Daniel's testimony had already reached high places. This teaches us that God can use any situation, even the most difficult ones, to fulfill his purposes. What looks like defeat may actually be the beginning of a miracle. Many times we do not understand the reason behind certain circumstances, but God sees beyond the moment. He turns crises into opportunities for the manifestation of his glory. Daniel did not lose control because he knew that God was in control, and that makes all the difference. When you remain steadfast, even the hardest moments become instruments in God's hands for something greater. Ninth lesson, God works beyond the natural. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. Forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O King, have I done no hurt. Daniel 6:22. Daniel's deliverance was not the result of favorable circumstances, but of God's direct intervention. In a situation where, humanly speaking, there was no way out, the Lord acted supernaturally. This teaches us that God is not limited by natural laws or by the impossibilities we see. When he decides to act, nothing can stop him. Daniel remained faithful, and God responded with protection beyond what anyone expected. This lesson strengthens our faith. There are moments when no logical solution exists, yet there is a God who works above all logic. He sees innocence, knows the heart, and intervenes at the right time. Even when everything seems lost, God still has the final word. The supernatural power of God is not common, but it is real. And when he acts, he can completely transform any situation. 10th lesson, the ending belongs to God. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Daniel 6:28. Daniel's story did not end in the lion's den, but in prosperity. This reveals a powerful truth. The ending is not determined by circumstances, but by God. Throughout the process, there was pressure, injustice, and danger, yet none of those things had the final word. God guided every detail toward an ending of honor. This lesson reminds us that we may not always understand the journey, but we can trust the destination. When we remain faithful, even in difficult moments, we are walking within a greater purpose. The process may be challenging, but it is not the end. God writes complete stories, and He does not stop in the middle of pain. The same God who allows the trial also establishes the deliverance and the reward. Therefore, do not give up halfway through the journey. Stay strong. The ending of your story is not in the hands of circumstances, but in the hands of God. And He always finishes better than He began. Daniel chapter 6 teaches us that living with God is not about avoiding difficulties, but about going through them with His presence. Daniel's story reveals that faithfulness can lead us into challenging situations where our faith, character, and trust are tested. Yet it also shows that God never abandons those who remain steadfast in Him. Even in the face of injustice, pressure, and danger, Daniel did not give up his communion with God. He did not compromise his faith, change his principles, or allow fear to control him. And that is exactly what made all the difference. God did not prevent Daniel from entering the lion's den, but He was with him inside it, protecting, guarding, and turning that situation into a powerful testimony. The same is true for us today. Perhaps you are facing difficult moments, complicated decisions, or situations that seem impossible to overcome. But remember, God is still in control. He sees everything, knows your heart, and acts at the right time. Remain faithful. Trust even when you do not understand. Because the same God who shut the mouths of the lions is still working today on behalf of those who fully trust in Him. Thank you so much for staying until the end of this video. May God deeply bless your life and strengthen your faith each day. See you in the next video.